Hello, my name is Wendy Love Edge, and I'd like to welcome you to the Bulldozer Health Show. In this episode, I'll be interviewing Julius Jones, founder of the Black Lives Matter chapter in Worcester, Massachusetts. Welcome to the show, Julius.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, tell me a little bit about Black Lives Matter, how it started and what it's about.
Yeah, Black Lives Matter started after the acquittal of George Zimmerman for the murder of Trayvon Martin about 3 years ago. BLM just turned 3. And it started when the co-founders, Alicia Garza, Opal Tometi, and Patrisse Cullors, sent a love letter to the Black community to affirm the importance of our lives and began the hashtag Black Lives Matter. And since it's evolved with that same intention intact to become a nationwide and international protest organization that fights for Black freedom through protests and local organizing.
Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of criticism recently of the organization, and in fact, Bulldozer Health has been criticized for kind of aligning themselves with the organization. Let's talk about that a little bit. Why do people get so irate about those simple words, Black Lives Matter?
Yeah, it's shocking to me. The conversation is 3 years on with the iteration of Black Lives Matter, and it seems like we're stuck in the same place, and there hasn't been very much forward movement. And people seem to say all lives matter as a contradiction, insult, put down to Black Lives Matter. And I think what we're seeing in the latest wave of anger, especially in response to the recent killings of police officers, is an oversimplified version of the truth. And people think that it's either you're for cops or you're for Black Lives Matter, and it's detrimental.
Right, I agree. I mean, one thing that I have noticed is that the response comes kind of quickly from many people when you say Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, right, as a response. And my response is, I'm not saying that other people don't matter. I'm saying that, and I believe you're saying, I want to speak for you, that Black lives matter, and this is the important thing that we need to talk about right now. That's sort of the itchy spot. This is really important. We have to put that forward. In saying Black Lives Matter, we're not saying that other lives don't matter. Is that true?
Definitely. It's it's not trying to affirm or put down any other form of life.
Right.
And I think what's indicative about people's reactions is that you can say a simple truth, and it elicits such a violent response.
Yes,
that
a really violent response.
It's
right.
And it's supposed to be a loving statement, right? All lives matter. Just in and of itself seems like, oh, that's great. It sounds almost spiritual, right? Right. But only time you hear it is in response to Black Lives Matter, and
right.
it's directly meant to be a put down to Black Lives Matter. And so we end up in this place where, it's an oversimplification. We seem to just want to have a good guy and a bad guy. Either you're Black or you're white. Either you're for Black Lives Matter or you're against Black people. And it robs us of the complexity of the conversation that we really need to be having.
Right.
In my opinion.
So what is that conversation we need to have?
I think, for me personally, it's about intersectionality, about healing, and about political and economic freedom for people. Intersectionality is a theory that came out of Black feminist thought and has since evolved, and it basically says that a person doesn't have just one lane of identity. It's not like you're just a woman or you're Black or you're queer. It's that those identities can exist in one place, and that person becomes an intersection of that oppression. And intersectionality 2.0, so to speak, speaks of there being no pure victims and no pure perpetrators anymore. And instead of trying to squelch the complexity, we need to uplift the complexity and really disentangle it in order to really make progress.
Well said. So tell me what is happening in Worcester, Massachusetts with this movement.
Continuing with that thread
Mm-hmm.
of intersectionality and healing, there's a lot of people who are concerned about not only Black Lives Matter nationally, but its relevant issues locally, like police in the schools, or police brutality, and police community relations, and a lack of representation in city government. All of these issues are very real in Worcester.
Mm-hmm.
And what oftentimes happens is that people who are on the same side of a question will get together and attempt to work it out, but sometimes have difficulty coming up with what a shared solution would look like.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a phenomena that is called the oppression Olympics that happens, where one group will feel threatened by the progress of another group,
Mm-hmm.
or it becomes impossible to form solidarity because there's so much tension between groups, intergroup tension, and then there's also intergroup tension. And so with BLM Worcester, what we're doing is trying to bring a healing space for us to really look at the oppression Olympics and how they play out in Worcester,
Mm-hmm.
and do so in a apolitical fashion. So socialists and anarchists and progressives and all the things in between, radical feminists and black freedom fighters can all sit in the same space and have real conversation about the damaging effects that oppression has on us all.
Right. That's
And-
amazing. I mean, we, as you may or may not know, I'm part of the LGBTQ community. And, actually, I frequently say, I'm kind of a small minority in myself, being raised Jewish, being a woman, being here from the North, being a lesbian, but those things, if you tease them out, sure, it could separate me from other people, but I don't allow that to happen. I hear what you're saying. The solidarity needs to happen, for all of us.
Mhm.
And I've felt that what I've learned about the Black Lives Matter movement is that is what you're trying to do. It's just that people aren't seeing that for some reason. Why do you think that is? It's just very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if I take my historical cap off,
Mm-hmm.
in the short term, I see it as people just coming up in different Americas. There's a certain American experience where you just don't have to tangle with the oppression of poverty, of
Mhm.
economic disenfranchisement, of political disenfranchisement, and overt oppression. And then there's an America where your oppression is more subtle, but it's still very real. And so no one lives without oppression in the United States. That's just
Right.
a simple
That's
truth.
true.
But when people can't see past their own to the other side, especially middle income, upper income folks who cast judgment on lower income folks, and especially people who don't have contact with or respect for black people or black life,
Mhm.
but also probably have a love for black culture. All of those contradictions are mixing into a real hot mess right now.
Mhm.
And so what we're seeing is, putting back my historical hat on, is how America never really dealt with this question of, are black people people?
Ah, okay.
And there's been, slowly moving the needle for us having full legal peoplehood, full legal respect and protection, same as everybody else,
Full equality.
full equality
Mhm.
by the law, and full enforcement of the law, but we're just not there yet. And we haven't been able to get there because there hasn't been an actual reflection and reckoning on what happened and where were the tragic lies
Mhm.
that were told about black people and about white people.
Right. So, Julius, something that you said really struck me when you said that there's a question in some people's minds as to whether black people are actually people. It's so out of my thought process. Tell me a little bit about that, maybe a little bit more, and also what it's like growing up in America as a black male, with that thought even in the back of your mind.
Yeah, I think just when I was a kid, there was fun, there was joy, there was love, there was happiness, there was trials, tribulations, same as most people. And then right about the time when they taught slavery in school was when I started to have to grapple with some of these, pretty tragically flawed ideas. Just at the founding of the Constitution, that black people were 3/5 of a person, and how we've legally it's been an evolving process to become 5/5 of a person and then to become equal. And to me, this notion of are black people, it sounds so simple on its face. Like, of course, black people are people, right? But when you look at the way that the United States legally, politically, economically, socially have treated black people, the answer is not so clear.
Right.
Right? And in fact, some people would say it's remarkably clear that they don't treat us like we're full people. Right? And so I think it goes back to this real core idea of, what is a slave? What is a slave? Can a person actually be owned by another person? And I think it's one of the greatest magic tricks ever pulled. So a white man wrote on a piece of paper, I own you. And then he suddenly owns you. And it's been the same with marriage, right?
Right.
I own my wife,
Right.
right? And then with slavery, it was like, okay, I just own black people and all their kids ever.
Right.
And it's
a crazy notion.
It's a crazy notion, know? But you never really hear people unpack that idea. And the way that it's being unpacked is with this simple statement, Black Lives Matter. And people get all up in their feelings about it.
I'd like to add to our conversation Mel Braman, who's joining us via telephone. She's an activist. Welcome to the show, Mel.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. So we were just talking a little bit. I think you were probably listening in about some ideas with Black Lives Matter and some issues that people may have with the movement. What are your thoughts?
In my history of the past 2 years, since Michael Brown was murdered, I live here in St. Louis, so I've been very active in Ferguson and St. Louis actions. I've not seen one act of violence from the protesters. The violence I've seen and the violence that I've been a part of have come from the police. Several times I've been hit with tear gas. My friend's been hit with rubber bullets. Cops invaded safe spaces, churches, coffee houses that were deemed as safe spaces during the non-indictment night of Darren Wilson. To me, that's violent.
Have you witnessed violence from protesters?
No, not at all,
No.
actually. And I think what people are chomping at the bit to do is to associate the shooters in Dallas and Baton Rouge with the Black Lives Matter movement. And the funny thing about it is that what America is essentially saying is it's not that we've, raped your people, exploited you economically, suppressed you and repressed you and oppressed you politically. That's the problem. It's just that you're talking about it.
Right. What do you think about that, Mel?
Because if we stay silent, then things will remain the same. And the genocide can continue and the oppression of black, brown people can continue. But if we speak up, then it shakes the system.
Right. And people are afraid of change, too. That's underlying also. I want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about, we were talking about growing up black in America and some of your thoughts about that. This is generally a health show that we do, and we cover all kinds of topics. But what are the thoughts about all of these things in the back of your mind growing up? How do you think that impacts your health or the health of other black Americans?
Well, I grew up in New York City in the 80s and 90s. And still today, I have a constant awareness of where I am, what I'm doing, and then I always keep in the back of my mind, what am I going to tell a cop if they pull me over, or if I interact with a cop,
Wow.
if they investigate me. It's just a constant awareness. And I think that a lot of Black people go through that, just this feeling of being over policed and overwatched. I study a healing modality called family constellations, and it deals with ancestral trauma. And there's some research coming down about how children of Holocaust survivors are affected by the trauma of their parents. Sure. And if you look at that as a very intense, very violent, very bloody example of the kind of violence that a people can go through, and then you look at also the experience of Africans in America, you can see how it can have a detrimental effect.
Sure. You know, I've said to people too, I mean, I have children, and I worry about them. I can't imagine having that additional worry, you know, on a regular basis. You know, I don't know if your mother's ever, you know, had that conversation with you. Is that a conversation that a Black mother has to have with their children, their sons especially? I mean, all of their children really, but.
Yeah, I mean, what's funny about it is, with some parents, it's explicit, you know, like this is what you do with cops. But I grew up in East Harlem in the 80s and 90s. And so there was a degree to which we didn't need to have that conversation, where the awareness of the police and how much they police our communities was so omnipresent that it was almost, it's just part of the fabric of life, you know.
Wow.
When I was 12, I had a toy gun and was walking down the street. I was playing with my friends. I was walking down the street with them, and two police officers came out of their cars, guns drawn.
Wow.
And it made me put my hands up, and it was a Tamir Rice situation, except I didn't get shot. Sure. Thankfully.
Wow.
So, you know, and that wasn't the last time. It wasn't the only time. And it's literally just like that.
You know, living in a survival mode, you know, whether it's from, you know, health issues and being sick all the time, or what we're talking about here today, it has so much detriment to the body. The body is releasing hormones for that, not for actually living, and but instead staying in survival. So, Mel, do you have any thoughts, you know, final thoughts, I guess, about how we can present this more to the community as a positive movement, how we can continue to have these conversations and maybe not get that irate response that we seem to get?
Yeah, I think it's really important for white folks to step up and do white folk work. I feel like it's our responsibility to back the demands of the Black Lives Matter movement and to dismantle white supremacy. It's ours to dismantle. And I think the approach is crucial. It's so important to call people into the movement. Yes. And call them out, not put people on the defense, to bring them in, find ways to bring them into the movement. It's going to take all of us.
It does take all of us. One love. So, do you have any final thoughts, Julius, that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think that freedom is a shared state, and that we're not going to be free without each other. I think that the wealthiest person who lives on the edges of opulence isn't actually free because they perpetuate and support a system that is oppressive. You don't have to be intuitive to feel that there's something off in this place. And either we're all going to make it or we're all not going to make it.
I agree.
I echo Mel's call to white people to do the work of getting yourself aware of your privilege and most people don't need to be made aware of their own victimhood, but getting in contact with that balance. Please investigate intersectionality, and then talk to your racist uncle or nephew or cousin or father. I know it's difficult, but Labor Day, Columbus Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas is right around the corner.
Yes.
You can have 4 conversations and move them 2% each time. That'll be closer to someone who won't kill a black person the next time they have a conflict with them.
Right. Perfect. Thank you so much for your fine work. And Mel, thank you so much for joining us and for all the work that you do. I know that both of you are in danger many times, and this is so important, and I thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Bulldozer Health Incorporated is a 501c3 nonprofit organization and healthcare reform initiative. You can find us at bulldozerhealth.org. Take back your health, America.